Imagine if you could build an app that brought together all of your different data sources in one convenient place. Well, Stacker can do just that. And in this video, I'm going to show you how you can bring in your Airtable data and your Google Sheets data, but there's loads of other different data sources that you could bring in as well. Don't believe me? Rude, but I'll show you. So, to add a new data source, click on this drop down here and click Add New Data Source. You'll be presented with a list of all of the data sources that you can connect. You should note that only Airtable and Google Sheets are available on all of our plans. If you want to use the other connectors, you'll need to speak to our enterprise team. But today, we're going to be focused on Airtable and Google Sheets. Let's start with Airtable. If you click Add, it will ask you to name your data source. I'm going to leave it as Airtable. And you'll need to post your API key. You can get this information by clicking on this link right here. It's really important that you don't share your API key publicly, as it acts as a kind of, key that someone could use to access your data, so make sure you keep it to yourself. I'm going to put mine in, but you're not allowed to see it. And lastly, we want to go over to Airtable and get a shared base link, which you can do again by following the instructions on the screen. I'm going to paste mine in here. And there you have it. All of the data that I had in that Airtable base has been pulled in. First thing you should notice when you bring in data from Airtable is that you can't change the field name or type. These are set by Airtable. If you do want to change these, you go over to Airtable and change them, and then click Refresh Schema, which is this button here. You'll need to do this whenever you update or add a new field in Airtable as well. And by the way, schema is just a fancy word for the collection of fields that you've set up in this app. And while you can't edit these fields, you can still add new fields in Stacker. These are called Stacker fields, and they'll only appear within Stacker, so these won't be sent over to Airtable. They're ideal if there's a bit of data that you don't need to keep in Airtable, but you want your users to be able to see or interact with within Stacker. By default, Stacker will bring in all of the fields from your Airtable. If you want to change that, you just click on the Fields button here, and you can decide that perhaps you don't want to bring in all of the data that you have for your Stacker app. We could also bring Google Sheets into our app. To do so, click on the Data Source dropdown, and click Add New Data Source, and you guessed it, we're going to click Google Sheets. It will then ask you to authenticate with Google and select a Google Sheet that you want to bring in. Once that's done, just click Done. And if we go back to the data grid, you can see that this Invoices sheet has been brought in. Now, Google Sheets is slightly different to Airtable because it doesn't have field types built into it, so sometimes you'll have to go in and adjust these manually when you first import your sheet. But you can see that Stacker's actually figured out that the amount for each of these invoices is a currency, the due date is a date, so it's pretty good at figuring that stuff out. And much like with Airtable, we can add Stacker fields within Stacker, and we can choose which of the fields we want to bring in from Google Sheets. At this point, something that's kind of cool is that we can start to link together our different data sources. So if I went over to Stacker Tables, which is where we had our projects page, it might be that we want to link these projects to specific invoices. So if I go to Add Field, I'll call this field Invoices. And I'm going to link it to multiple records so I can have multiple invoices for this one project. And now I can choose which invoices belong to which project. And if I go back over to our Google Sheet, it understands which of the projects each invoice has been linked to. And so you can start linking together your Airtable data with your Google Sheets data, with your Stacker Tables data, which is pretty cool. And so that's how using an external data source works. You can see our app's beginning to come together here, and in the next tutorial we're going to cover off how you can make your app look awesome.